Meeting order 6 o'clock. Thank you all very much for being here. So we're all here. Now, what's that special thing?
That special thing.
Oh, this is.
For what?
Is this my?
This, no, for Paul.
Like, we can't, it's a special meeting, can't do it.
Oh, all right. We thought we'd get it squared away, but since we
I
didn't
just gave it.
entice you down, we just gave it to him. Gotcha.
Sorry.
But you're special, Paul, to us.
Not as special as the meeting, however.
All right, looks like we do have quite a few signups for public comment. We'll just dive right in. First up, we have Stephanie. You could make sure to introduce yourself and where you're from for the record, please.
I'm Stephanie Lilligard. I own the bookstore here in town. I'm married into a family that's been here since 1904, and we live up Kanaka Creek Road, so I just was down here real quick. I wanted to put in a little bit of comment about the courthouse plaza that's proposed. As a person who opened a bookstore here, this is our 7th year, I have to say that my opinion of the town and what I thought it was made up of has really changed. And the personality of the town does still have people like my husband's great grandpa, who apparently wrote into the paper and said that if people wanted to drive on paved roads, they could just move to Portland. So some of that spirit lives on here in Stevenson, like we like it here and this is where we live and we don't need to be invaded. But I have come to see that in the 7 years that we've been open, the tourism that started to take the place of the forestry economy that we used to have around here is important to us because there's tourist dollars coming in. We can have really great restaurants because they pay for them. And my personal store that I have is about 60 or 70% local people in the slower winter months and about 60 or 70% tourists in the summer months. So I depend on tourism, but I really wondered about that courthouse plaza. And then I saw what happened with the streetery. And I think that's our proof. I think that if we had a place in the middle of town where people could say, I'm going to go over to the grocery store, you guys go down to the bookstore, and we'll meet at that place right there with all the grass and the places to sit and stuff. But that would be awesome for people coming into town. And if I was a visitor in town, I think that we would use it. So I really hope that the council and the county and whoever all else is involved in this will put it together and make the thing happen, because I think it makes kind of a living room for the town. And then all those people can come and sit for a while and then they can go home.
After they leave their money.
Yeah, exactly. After they leave their money. And that's kind of all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Paul.
I'm Paul Hendricks from Stevenson. I was on the city, committee that wrote the current comp plan. Was on the planning commission for several years, the county planning commission for a few years, and of course, city council for several years. And I am speaking strongly in favor of the Park Plaza project. This will be an economic boom for specifically downtown. The entire city, even the entire county will benefit from this. We'll all benefit from this. I'd like to draw a comparison between, well, there's one in Oregon City that is really nice, but throughout Latin America, all these little towns will have a centralized park plaza. And when I first started traveling, I was maybe 22 years old or so. Was in Costa Rica, and there was at home in the States, most people would have been behind a computer screen and watching TV, that sort of thing. Here they were out in the public space enjoying themselves. I remember watching this father and daughter dancing salsa together in this park plaza. And I was like, man, why don't we have lives like this? And this project is exactly the kind of community thing that we envisioned back, what, 15 years ago when we wrote the comp plan. It's what we envisioned throughout my time on the planning commission, and also as a member of city council. I thought this was a done deal. Had I known that it was still in jeopardy on any level, I would have ran for reelection, because I absolutely would have voted for this in every possible way. This is an important project for this community. I support it completely. Thank you.
David,
I'm David Wyatt, Stevenson resident, former city council for a time, current librarian, and current SDA president. As you might imagine from that list, I am in favor of the courthouse plaza project. I think a lot of what both Stephanie and Paul have been saying are also the reasons I'm for it, and that sort of sense of community. I've started volunteering with the Downtown Association, and these sorts of projects like the Streetery that we do that bring together people in the community. Lighting for Christmas in the Gorge, putting up Christmas in the Gorge up on the courthouse lawn, which we'll still be able to do once that courthouse plaza is in place. Just all of those different things that center around downtown, around that area, will just be enhanced by the proposed project and give a great place for people to gather, locals and visitors alike. Thank you.
Barry?
Me?
Yep.
Well, thank you very much. Mary Rapar Stevenson. Thank you, Mayor. As you know, I oppose this project strongly. I don't think we need to give up our open space that is in the courthouse plaza. Stevenson downtown will never be a downtown like other downtowns. It's Highway 14. You're not going to have a concert venue there because there's no parking. So why not put this down by the port or someplace where you can do parking? The Streetery is wonderful, but I never see more than 10 people there in the summer. And during the winter, nobody's there. So spending other people's money is always easy. And $4.2 million for this project is way too much. We've already asked the American taxpayer to loan us or give us 15 million for our sewer project. And I don't think we need to do this. I don't want to see the trees cut. Don't want to see that open space cut up. And I do not think that the cost benefit analysis has actually been done on what would happen to that front lawn and to the courthouse if people started digging into the hillside. I've sent you some information about architectural folks who know about cutting into hillsides, and the weight of that courthouse is too much to go digging into it. So, and also, I think you're going to get into trouble with using lodging tax for this project. I don't think there's been enough done about if we can actually use that money to build this. And also, the splash pad thing is totally dangerous and useless. $1 million for a splash pad when you've got a river 200 yards downstream is not acceptable. Again, using other people's money is easy. And this will not help this community in the sense of providing a central place. I live here. I don't want to have more people downtown. Parking is already a problem. So I ask you to not do this. And if we want public bathrooms, we can build them someplace else. The sheriff's is open 24/7. It's safe. There's cameras there. Let's lead people to that. 4.2 million for a public bathroom is not acceptable. As I've heard some people say, they want this for public bathrooms, so we can have a public bathroom on the courthouse lawn. The picture in my brain is not nice. So I ask you not to approve it. I think this is too much money spent. And I like those cherry trees and I like the hawthorn trees. Thank you.
Bob?
Mr. Mayor, my name is Bob Wilson. I'm a fourth generation Stevensonian. I came to ask the council to consider perhaps referring the issue presented by this proposed park plaza to the vote of the people. I personally am opposed to it, but I think if the people want it over my personal objections, I'd suggest that maybe we ought to go find out what the folks whose money is going to be spent on this project. We ought to find out what their sentiments are about paying for this project. I respectfully submit, Your Honor, excuse me.
Love it.
Thank you, sir.
Sustained.
I respectfully submit that we might consider referring this to a plebiscite or a referendum or whatever might be appropriate to get the votes vocalized. There's one more thing, if I might add, this splash pad thing is a little bit troublesome to me as an attorney. I think there's another very competent attorney here in the room, at least one, who can lecture us all about attractive nuisances, which are things that are an invitation to folks who may not appreciate the danger inherent in the location. And if it is a substantial risk, we may wind up buying into a whole bunch of potential liability. But if we insure it, the insurance premiums are going to cost money, and I'm sure somebody from the insurance industry would love to hear that. Thank you all. Sorry.
Thanks, Bob. Rick? Richard, there you go.
I'm Rick Jessel from Stevenson, and now for something totally different. I'm going to talk about the American Recovery Act funds and the choices between extending the sewer up Frank John's or using the money to pay down the $1.1 million still owed on the sewer treatment plant. Although the extension of Frank John's might help me in the long run, given my age. I don't know if that matters that much, but anyway, I would prefer to see the money go to the wastewater treatment plant because the rates are fairly high, and anything that can reduce the rates for the existing people on the system would I think be a benefit in the short run, and in the long run, hopefully we can see more solutions to the sewer extension problems. So I would recommend using that money in that way. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Angie?
Angie Rice, I'm a resident of Stevenson. I'm also the executive director of the Skamania County Chamber of Commerce. So I'm here in support of the Courthouse Plaza project. One of the roles that the chamber plays is that we promote tourism and tourism related projects within our region. And we also support local businesses and projects and initiatives that are good for business. And so that the Park Plaza project checks both of those boxes. As far as tourism and benefits to tourists, the Park Plaza will offer a place for social interaction. So a place where tourists can gather and socialize and mingle with locals. This interaction enhances their experience and makes them feel more connected to this destination. Cultural experience for them. The plaza will reflect our local culture through the architecture and design of the plaza and also the activities that are offered there. As far as festivals and events, the plaza is obviously an ideal space for hosting events and activities for both community and tourists. The current events that happen there would have the opportunity to expand with that space, and it could attract new activities and events there. These events always attract tourists and they encourage them to spend more time in the community and spend more money. Which brings me to the last point is economic impact. Having a vibrant plaza stimulates the local economy by attracting tourists who spend money in our local shops, restaurants, attractions, and overnight accommodations. Studies have shown that well-designed plaza spaces can lead to higher foot traffic, longer stays, and increased spending. So for those reasons, we support the project. I also should say that I do sit on the Lodging Tax Advisory Council, and we've always approved funding for this project because we feel it falls within the parameters of the use of the funds, and it's a good project to support.
Kelly?
Because I have so much to say, I tried to put it on paper.
Name and location.
So I'm Kelly O'Malley McKee. I'm the executive director of the Stevenson Downtown Association since March of 2020. I'm a Stevenson resident since 2015, and I married into the McKee family, which last year celebrated 100 years in Stevenson, Washington. I love this community. I'm really proud of what the Stevenson Downtown Association has been able to do in the last 4 years that I've been a part of it. And that was over COVID as well. As you know, the plaza discussion started back as early as 1986, but this particular project that we are speaking of today actually began in 2012 when community leaders came together and identified the need to create a sense of place in downtown Stevenson. And over the past 12 years, already much work has been done behind the scenes. So even though we don't see work on the lawn itself, we've gone through several design options. We've taken soil samples, land surveys, we've had tribal discussions, archaeological investigations, several community surveys, a handful of community open houses, 3 RCO grant applications, and finally an MOU with the county to lease the land to the city in order to proceed with this project. And of course, lots of investment of resources already made in time and money. We at Stevenson Downtown Association even have $100,000 from WKO Mill that has been sitting in our bank account for 5 years, because the restriction on that donation is to give it to us and to be able to use it when shovels are digging the dirt for this project. We are poised and ready to begin active fundraising to help support this project. We cannot apply for grants. We've learned we can't apply for these grants or private donations without shovel-ready designs and plans, as well as a construction timeline, because the grant funders need to have those answers and those details in order to provide their money. We know that there are placemaking grants out there and we're ready to apply. We just need the council to take this next step with Understory so that we can keep on track with the project. And while there have been very small amount of loud opposition voices, we have surpassed most of these hurdles and have responded, and have even altered the designs based off of some of these concerns. And I just wanted to recap our 2024 recent survey results, and I'm going to recap them with the 5% margin of error, because we received 432 total responses. 370 are needed for an accurate sample size of a 10,000 population, as long as you provide a margin of error of 5%. So with that, our downtown stakeholders that are not against the project range between 65 and 75%. Again, not against the project, 65 to 75%. Downtown stakeholders are live, work, or own property. As far as daily visitors that are not against the project, that is 58 to 68%. Not against the project, 58 to 68%. The plaza will be the central gathering place, as folks have talked about how the streetery has started to show what it can be. And as far as the events that already happened like over the winter, like the Starlight Parade. And finally, I wanted to share the Municipal Research and Services Center of Washington. Quote, public plazas can play an important role for a community. They often serve as a symbol for a community's identity and can act as the city's town or living room, city or town's living room, where people gather for special events and everyday social interactions. Public plazas can also be an economic catalyst that attracts visitors and new businesses to a community. Ideally, you want your plaza to be located where the action is, such as in your downtown or commercial center. A public gathering place that is situated in an isolated, out-of-sight location is less likely to be successful. Furthermore, I have some Esri retail demand data. That's a database that looks at resident spending. And we have a report from for residents within a 10-mile radius of downtown. In last year, our residents within 10 miles spent $6 million on entertainment and recreation, and they are forecasting them to spend over 7 million. This data shows that if we can entice locals to stay in our area, that instead of going elsewhere an hour away for entertainment activities, apparel or others, we know our business district can survive and thrive. And then the data for apparel and services, forgot to mention that they spent $3.2 million in 2023. Residents within 10 miles spent $3.2 million in 2023. And they estimate almost 4 million in 2028. I urge council to vote to extend Understory's contract to keep us on track for this project.
Anyone else? All right, thank you, everyone. All right, first order of business, approving the contract amendment with Understory Landscape Architecture.
So the last meeting, council had some questions with regards to the contract and whether or not it could be canceled. They also requested I reach out to the county to see if we can get a letter of support, and then also questions regarding the tourism funding use. And so there's a staff memo and associated documents that were in the council packet. The email and memo from the city attorney regarding the use of the TAC funds, as well as the ability to cancel the contract within 30 days is outlined in the original agreement. And then Councilmember Rice requested a copy of the letter that was submitted to the county commissioners with regards to their support of the project. As a result of that communication, one of the things that they would like would be to have a joint meeting on the Park Plaza project.
Okay, is there a time?
It's us now, buddy.
Yeah. Well, I just note that first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming. Actually, I've traveled, I agree with you, Paul, that I've traveled the world kind of extensively, and that Central Park has always been a highlight of our travels. Of course, I do note that all those climates weren't as rainy as ours, and it was sunny and warm at most of those places. So I think we have a different climate here, but anyway, one of the I guess I know a couple things concern me, and one of them is that the county commissioners, none of them signed the proposed letter of support. All three didn't sign it, chose not to, and that was an active move on their part. And Commissioner Mayhar, I'm told, is going to propose an advisory vote on the November ballot. And his point is that there's 9,114 voters out there, and the November ballot by the county at their expense, putting on the advisory vote that, and in the presidential election year, that will really get a good measure of what people think. And if that vote came back and the majority of people wanted the county to turn that land over to the city, I would vote in favor of this project. My concerns about the expenditure notwithstanding. So that is why November, in fact, we have a November city council meeting. Okay. And that vote would be in.
by then, by our next meeting. So, what I would like to see happen, and I'd make a motion that we not approve this contract amendment now with understory landscape architecture for the design services of the contract of the courthouse park plaza, you know, and the amount of the dollar amount that's stated there. At this point in time, that we, if we were gonna vote, we vote no now, but we take this issue up in November. Because that's only 4 months away. Now, my big concern here is financial. Once these dollars are spent, we can't spend them again. So my big fear, let's say, is, and I'd have this, whether I was historically in favor of this and as much of a proponent as a lot of other people are, this would still be my concern. That that we're gonna spend $355,000 additional dollars, and then we're not gonna, the lack of support right now from the commissioners that would not sign that letter, that's gonna continue and it could get worse, and we're gonna spend that money, and this is never gonna be built. So those concerns would happen, even if I just was the biggest booster for this project. And so my concerns are based on the money. So that's why I would make that motion the way I stated it. You know, to not approve the contract amendment. I know we're gonna have discussion, to not approve the contract amendment with understory landscape architecture at this time, and that we put off a vote until in November. And that's 4 short months away.
So can we have further discussion before we go forward with that? I think as a public official, we have to make sure both sides of the fence are mowed. We have to represent everyone, no matter what our particular personal feelings are about any given situation. Myself, I like the project. I don't know if I like the current design, but I like the idea of the project. I have several concerns about the project. I have talked to 2 of our county commissioners this week. My first major concern is Ray Perez, who is a real proponent of this project, has said that there is no funding coming next year for this project. That is major. The county has done an assessment by their new insurance carrier on all of the county real estate and the amount of liability that carries. What has come up is they found out, even though a lot of us knew it, the 3 commissioners found out that they own Wauriki, which is the old Washougal Honor Camp at the end of the Washougal River Road, which is in disrepair right now. But they have been leasing that out. According to their new insurance carrier, even though they lease that property out and whoever that leasee is carries the required liability insurance, if there were a suit, they are the next rung down on the ladder, so to speak, for a suit, even though that leasee has full insurance. So basically the county is still liable for that property. So my question to the commissioners was, okay, where does that put us? Because we're talking a 99-year lease, and the liability that you are talking about would carry forward on that. And the comment was, we would have to look at probably selling the property to the city in order for that project to move forward without the county taking on liability, or trading assets. In other words, trading that property for an asset that a real property asset that the city may have. The only problem with that is the only real asset that we have city property wise is up off of Long Creek with our timber up there. So that, to me, that's a huge hurdle. So now we're looking at maybe having to come up with an additional revenue stream in order to fund this, besides doing all of the construction and the design. Got all the notes here. Battleground has closed down their splash pad because kids have slipped and actually hit their heads this year already. They have closed it down. They are regrinding the surface to make it rougher. One of the problems with, and this, don't get me wrong, this project had water features in it from the get-go. That was one of the desirable coming out of the committee, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Paul? So whether it's a waterfall, whether it's a water fountain, whether it's a splash pad, call it what you want. The issue is, if you're having that water there available to the public, there are health standards by WAC that need to be addressed in order to have that water accessible. That means chlorination, filter, whatever, which includes all of the underground infrastructure that it takes to run that. That is a major cost, as far as I'm concerned, for ongoing maintenance that the city would have to take on in order to be able to run this project. I have angst about that. I don't want to take on additional liability for our maintenance staff. They're already basically working 24/7 trying to make sure that we have an adequate infrastructure in place. And the last thing was the comment about that Commissioner Rice made about the advisory board. We had talked about us maybe doing an advisory vote and the city sponsoring that. We talked about that being somewhere in the neighborhood of over $10,000. Well, now the county is talking about wanting to make sure that there's an advisory vote done. That is fine with me. I would just as soon have the county take on that and have the county pay for that. And I hope they're listening, as opposed to the city doing that. And I think that is an important piece of this puzzle. So having said that, those are the concerns that I have about the project. I would like to see it maybe pared down a little bit. Take another look at the splash pad. The problem with that is we start pulling elements out of the plaza design. How does that affect our ability to use our hotel motel tax? And what is going to be, how are you going to articulate the draw that this particular piece of property is going to do for our tourism industry? And so as you start pulling elements out of that particular design, your ability to articulate how to bring those tourism funds and the draw to bring those people in becomes more difficult. So those are some of the concerns that I have. So.
Well, I mean, I have a question. Of the current contract with Understory Landscape, what percentage of that is completed already? Do we know what it's all, everything's done, so this is
Well, let me rephrase that. It's mostly complete. There's a component of there related to the Russell Avenue. The design for the Russell Avenue project, because with the original design, it was the whole width of the
Mhm,
property, and so we were gonna do both at the same time. They
Gotcha.
can move together independently.
Mhm.
The Russell design is funded through the street fund. But with everything that's gone on with the rest of the project, I haven't moved forward with the design for that one.
Okay. I mean, I don't have any issue with the idea of a vote in, on the ballot.
You might want to speak up.
Oh, sorry, I don't have any
Rick can hear
issue with with having a vote in November for this on the ballot, and especially if the county's gonna fund it, I have no problem with that. I do know that we've had public support, and I know that there is both sides, like there are people who are against it. I personally have run into a lot of people that are for it, whether they're business owners or not. Just citizens in Stevenson, and I know we have some people here who are longtime, families that have been here for a long time on both sides of this, that are pro and that are against. And my family is one of those that's been here for multiple generations on both sides. And so personally, I'm for it. The people that I have talked to about this, maybe it's because it's people that I know, but the people that I've talked to about this are for it. I want to be a good steward of what we do as far as money goes as well. But if we don't get this moving, if we don't continue this moving, then we aren't set up to be able to have the funding that we need to continue the project. So if is pausing a contract with them until November even is that something we could do?
We
Or
won't meet
not?
the deadline for June
That's-
30th, 2025 for the grant that we have.
That's when we have to pay that money that we already have,
I'd have to reach out
right?
to see what the options would be.
That's
So,
So-
yeah, sounds like there's,
for me, there is a timetable on this portion of it I understand to continue the project, to basically stopping this vote until November on this particular piece of the project. Starts eliminating funding, and right now funding is our main, like the concern that most people have is making sure that that's why the city has it at all, is because so we can apply for funding and so we can get public funding, so. But for me, putting it on hold until November, if that's going to eliminate us from grants we've already received and applying for additional funding for this project, if waiting until then is going to stop that. Then I have.
Yeah.
I have issue with that, so.
what I heard Leanna say, Michael, is that she'd have to reach out to them, so that's not a certainty that would stop the problem, stop the project or hurt us on funding.
She'd have to reach out to the options, we would miss the deadline, she'd have to reach out to options as to whether or not we can get an extension or whether we can.
So there are
whatever.
options.
Possibly.
An
Not-
extension to what?
We
The
already,
legislature would need to extend our contract, and that contract was initially obligated in 2021.
Even before that.
Say before that, so it was, it was a number of years ago, and it was given to the SDA, and there were issues over trying to figure out how the SDA could get the money, and then it was, it had to go to a political subdivision as a pass-through. And so it was determining whether the county or the city would take it on and manage the project, and that's how we got to our 2022 agreement, and then took over the grant. So, but ultimately, the legislature would have to approve any extensions of the funding.
Is that the 147,000 that you're talking about?
thoughts?
Yeah, I would, I generally agree with Dave's concerns about the splash pad. But about the cost, I understand the concern that people see a big number. But to think about it from a different perspective, if we're talking about 4.5 million, that's a one-time cost of about 60 cents per person in Washington. And we're talking about nationally, it's like 1 penny. So it's larger cities get much larger amounts to build much nicer plazas. Um,
One of the things is that's 350. Let's say, I think it's probably pretty likelihood that the county is gonna go ahead. Whatever we do tonight with their advisory vote, and if they do, and when, then, and that vote comes in negative for this project. It's probably pretty certain that this project is over and that 355K is gone. Has been spent and is gone.
Well, yeah, again, it's based on deliverables.
Yeah, but
And so depending on what they go between there.
right,
and
I understand
those-
that.
They're not gonna blow that full 355,000. Then, so,
Well, yeah,
yeah,
we,
but yes, go ahead.
but
I'm
no,
sorry.
we don't, but they got 4 months to be actively working on this project and coming up with a
Absolutely.
plan. So we, by delaying 4 months, in other words, we're all agreeing there's risk either way.
Mhm.
And, so that's, I'm just. From my perspective, I'm trying to be really fiscally cautious
But
and,
what I'm trying to say is the cost increases are because of pushing off the project. It's gonna increase the longer we wait.
well, I know, but I'm
Absolutely.
concerned that the advisory vote, if it doesn't come in positive. That then this project likely is going to be over. For various reasons, and then that money is gonna be gone. Now, you're right, on the national level, that's probably pennies per person. On the state level, it's 60 cents. I don't doubt your numbers one bit, but on the local level,
Talking about the cost, full cost for the whole, estimated
Yeah.
cost for the whole.
I'm just trying to say it's, that's at 355,000 is a big number for our small town.
I think a couple of other things that come into play in this too is you have 2 new commissioners coming on board. It's gonna be bring a fresh perspective into Skamania County government. And also we have a national election coming up. Depending on which way that goes, that may either increase funding or decrease funding further, depending on which one wins. So we have those dynamics that we're playing with as well. I would prefer that, let me make sure that I understand this. What happens June 25th? Or whenever the contract is finalized, finishes, what happens at that point?
June 2025.
Yes, June,
Which contract, the grant contract? or the
Grant.
grant contract. The 147,000,
Right,
we've pretty much already spent that out,
oh
right?
yeah.
So are you saying that we have to pay that back?
If we can't produce the deliverable, we would have to pay it back.
Okay, and
And if we can't meet the deadline, we may need to pay it back. I haven't looked into
Okay,
the
so
contract and I would need to.
the
talk to the
deliverables
secretary.
based on that grant were the first phase of the project.
The deliverable is a shovel-ready design.
The deliverable for that grant is shown.
For that 147,000 was a shovel-ready design.
So we're spending 355K, putting 355K at risk to protect 147K.
Isn't 355 the maximum total?
That's the additional amount.
That's right.
That's new money.
Yeah.
That's new money. So it's 355K because we have 147K at risk. And and I could be wrong in my assessment, but let's just say that advisory vote comes in negative, depending on how much it's negative, if it does. Then we've not just put 147K, but it's whatever the total figure is, which is 570 or something. So that is my concern, and I would just have this concern no matter what, whether it's a huge booster or not, because Now, there's another thing that could happen. Let's say that the public overwhelmingly supports this project. That enthusiasm and that evidence that a lot of the local politicians would have gives them more, so they can say, hey, let's get going on this.
Yeah.
Let's get going on this. We lost a lot of time, but the public would never be able to say that we did not get their input. And I think it's probably, we'll know in a week whether or not from what I understand, the county is putting forth a resolution and they're going to be voting on it relatively soon. So I'm just advocating because of the motion I made, which hasn't gotten a second yet. I'm just advocating that we pause. And I know there's risk, but there's risk the other way too, is we all have to agree. There's risk both ways.
Bear in mind, if it does come back positive without this funding, the project might be moved anyway, because we need to keep it moving.
What's that, Scott?
If the vote, if that's the direction that we're going, comes back positive, if this plan has died before then because we can't fulfill the contract, then it's moved. So kind of important to keep the project moving.
But Mr. Mayor,
Why couldn't the project keep moving once we find out about the advisory?
Do we have a drop dead deadline on when we need to have
June
this?
30th, 2025 is
Alright.
the current deadline that we're working on.
So what's your concern is that if we don't extend this, then we won't be able to make that anyway.
Yeah.
Right, so the concern is.
So we don't know, and we don't know whether or not we would be able to get. Well, nothing's guaranteed, but.
I don't know who's gonna be in office come January, so I can't say what the legislature will do. I only know one is running unopposed, but the rest of the legislature for the state, I don't know.
Yeah. Yes.
Unless there's a big writing county. Yeah.
Everybody gets.
So boy, there's a lot.
Can I ask a quick clarification?
Is
This proposed vote is this?
Wait.
No.
No, this is council consideration.
the thing is, as you said, Dave, we're gonna have a lot of other issues too that we're gonna have to deal with the county. In other words, there's gonna be a lot of tough issues here no matter what. Let's say that the public comes back and they strongly support this. Well, then they're still gonna have to.
We still have to figure out how we're gonna pay for the property if that's
Yeah, so
required.
there's a lot of
There's a
stuff.
lot of other things that are gonna have to go on in order to move this project.
And
forward.
let's say that does come in positive, okay? Well, then I think we could be framing, if that 355 is still there, of course, it's gonna have to be spent on design, but we're just gonna have a lot more information, is what I'm trying to say, and then that money is still there to be spent. And we might even need, depending on the state auditor's office and our legal advice on how those funds, how lodging tax funds can be used, but it might be then if we had a strong vote in favor. And I think we could equally have a pretty strong vote negative, we don't know yet. We all will have different ideas on that, but that potentially there could even be funds to purchase the property. Because we can then justify it because we can say, hey, look this was what the public has wanted, countywide, they made this decision. So, but anyway.
Mr. Cox, only for your consideration though, is that the county could not change terms and conditions and require the city to purchase the property. They would have to honor the terms and conditions of the MOA and lease it to us as already agreed to, otherwise they'd be in breach.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
just because the commissioner said that.
So the contract, this contract with them only goes through June of 25 anyway.
No, he's talking about the MOU that we have with Skamania County, and that goes for 35 days.
Oh, right, okay.
So they
what I'm
have to.
saying is they
lease it,
cannot
they
tell
can't
us to buy the
say we have to buy it. To make the project go forward, they can't say we have to buy it.
Yeah.
Even though
Okay.
one of the exiting commissioners might have told you that, that's not the case.
Okay. So, but switching gears,
Sure.
looking at the extension on this to go shovel ready
Mhm.
is by June 30, 2025. which is also the end date.
The contract
Right.
with Understory, right?
Right,
Right.
which is what she's saying, we can't wait for 4 months. Because if we don't start this extension now. They're saying they'll get it done, they'll have shovel-ready designs by the deadline of the grant. If we wait 4 months, they won't have shovel-ready designs by the deadline of the grant. Is what they're saying. That's what that contract is explaining.
So you don't think that they would want to earn that money in November if we offered in that contract?
They're gonna backfill their projects. It's not the way they work. They don't sign the amendment here in a short reasonable time. They'll move on to the next project. Because there is no damage and they don't get any collection. There's not any liquidated damages for our termination.
I've just learned when I do due diligence that I'm always leery when somebody says you have to do your due diligence by this date and there's pressure on the date, do this or this will happen. I'm always inclined to think, well, yeah, bad things can happen. That's right. But because any one of us might have different numbers, but if we had to if we all made an educated guess, what's our risk on either way, whether you did this now or whether you waited and preserved the money, there's big risk there is a lot of risk in spending this money now and not waiting until November because it may be irretrievable and this project still fails and it goes nowhere. So anyway, I made my point.
And I see the other way as well. I see it as if we don't move forward with this now. And keep us on a path to actually getting the deliverables by the time it's over, if either direction we're gonna be. If the project does move forward and then we have to go and pay back 147 was unnecessary. Have to go back to 147 had we move forward now. So there is you're absolutely right on the risk on either side. I'm not saying there's not, so.
And so if we were to move forward with this, and then we get a negative vote. And it gets shut down, not only do you have the 147,000, but whatever else has been turned in
In the
at
last 4
that
months.
point,
Correct.
that the city is on the hook for as well. I'm not willing to do that. I'm sorry. I'll second Pat's motion.
We have a first and a second. Is there any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Opposed.
That's a draw.
The funding issue,
I know,
I
man.
don't believe you have,
Can.
nope, can't,
That leaves.
dies. Unless it comes back out. I mean, it's happened before. We had it with the marijuana shop. It died and then Amy got on the phone and it passed.
We don't have that phone friend often today.
I guess Miss McCaskill's already resigned. So,
What's next on the agenda?
Wow. That really surprises me, guys.
That motion was to delay until November.
And, yeah, so there's
So
still,
can we make the original motion?
let's see,
It's gonna be two either way.
What's that?
so the motion was to delay the vote.
Delay the
Well,
vote. till
No, the motion is whether or not to approve the contract tonight.
Yeah,
The motion
correct.
is not to approve the contract.
Yeah, the motion was not.
Now, the basis for the motion was he wanted to push it out. Councilmember Mr. Rice wanted to push it out, so. The motion is, do we approve a
Yeah,
funding contract tonight? And you have a 2-2 vote, you can't override, you can't vote. Right.
Yeah.
The project that you've been working on for
10.
8 years, 10 years, yeah. There you go.
All right. Well done. All right, Carolyn.
Right, so, First Street. Over the project. This is, resolution to be able to close First Street to traffic, from on the Ave to Frank John's Road and instead detour traffic on Second Street. For the duration of the project, it's an 80-day contract time, so it would be July, August, September roughly. So.
Only question, were you able to follow up to determine if that particular subcontractor that's got, I guess, the significant amount of work is, is the one that's in. I ran aware because there's two, one of them is not valid to work in the state, so the other one was, but it was confusing in the contract docs. I was just wondering if you had a chance to make that phone call.
No.
Okay,
Yeah,
we follow up tomorrow, but yeah.
Yeah. But relevant to
Yeah.
this.
No, this is just a closure
This
issue.
is
Yeah.
closer.
Yeah, need a
I'd like to
resolution to close the street.
for resolution 2024-437, authorizing the temporary closure of a road to ensure public safety. Period.
First and a second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ben,
All right, deep dive into critical areas ordinance in the update. I'm gonna start with the why we're doing this, and the short answer is that we have to. The longer answer, kind of start with the framework for how Washington State manages land use, or how it expects the local jurisdictions to manage how land is used within the state. So in the 1920s, there was something that was put forward by the US Department of Commerce called the Standard State Enabling Act. And so the US Department of Commerce put together legislation that any state could adopt that set the framework for how land was managed. So that was adopted by several states, Washington included. That's the 1920s. As time went on, the American public started to think that that framework wasn't suiting them, or resulting in the types of communities or built environment that people wanted. And so they started, each state started changing those. Oregon was a front runner in how they were changing that with their statewide land use management, and land use planning goals in the 1970s. So 50 years, Oregon came out and said, no, this Standard State Enabling Act legislation is not the way to do things. And so they proposed a different way. They were a leader in the nation, and they were able to learn several things about how their system worked and change some things. Washington came in the 1990s, seeing the lessons that Oregon had learned and seeing what that was producing for the state over there. And Washington adopted the Growth Management Act, having learned some of those lessons. One of the lessons that Oregon learned was when they came out of the gates with their proposal, it was a thou shalt for every community in the state. Thou shalt do things this way, achieve these statewide land use planning goals. They found that that was onerous for small jurisdictions, places that weren't growing or didn't need the type of planning, or didn't benefit from all the effort that the state required of them. Washington learned that. And so when the Growth Management Act was adopted in the 90s, Washington State came out of the gate saying, this only applies to the large, fast-growing jurisdictions in the state. And for those jurisdictions, you have to plan in all of these ways. And that Growth Management Act legislation is very long. However, if you're a small or slow growing community, you don't have to plan in all those ways. You only have to plan for critical areas and natural resource lands. And that's where we fall. So we don't have to do.
So make it easier for the smaller agencies
to get by. Yeah. There's still a large concern in the 90s about the natural environment. The anadromous fish is a particular focus that we have to integrate into our regulations. Anadromous fish are fish that spend part of their time in freshwater and part in saltwater. So that's the umbrella term for salmon, steelhead. And so the declining populations at the time, concern about the fish at that time meant to the state legislature that all communities need to plan for that. We're one of those communities. Critical areas are more than just that. They include 5 different types of environmentally sensitive areas. Critical aquifer resource recharge areas. So if there's a drinking water aquifer for many people, planning for what land use happens on top of that, this drinking water aquifer doesn't end up being polluted by the land uses in the community is important. So plan for those. We have regulations related to those. Frequently flooded areas, we have regulations for those. I'll make that one short, so we don't want people to lose life or property to flood, and we have those regulations. You recently updated the city of Stevenson's regulations and to be consistent with federal expectations. Geologically hazardous areas, another one that you guys can see as you look around the community. There is a history of movements here. And we plan for that by regulating development when it comes in. They're doing their analysis, having an engineer verify that construction isn't going to destabilize slopes or mitigate it if there's a chance that it would destabilize. Wetlands are another one that's closely related to the habitat areas and naturalist fisheries. Fish and wildlife habitat areas are going to be all focused on the most tonight because that's the coming changes that we'll have to grapple with are the biggest in that area. So there's a particular focus on the naturalist fisheries. When we plan for critical areas, we have to have that focus and we have to base our regulations on the best available science. That's a term that the legislature put into the legislation, and it's since been defined. Shorthand for that would be something like you would see in a scholarly article. So there's a hypothesis that's tested and the results are peer reviewed before it can be considered best available science. The State Department of Fish and Wildlife knows that communities have to plan for this and incorporate the best available science into their planning. And so a few years back, they came out with a peer-reviewed work that had met the definition for best available science, and the resulting recommendations are a sea change from what they were before. So currently, when we talk about riparian habitat areas, we base things on the size of the stream, whether it's intermittent or is there on a year-round basis, whether it carries fish in it, or whether it doesn't carry fish in it, or whether it's a shoreline of the state. The big ones, Rock Creek for us, Rock River, Columbia River. And we established protective buffers based on that. That was consistent with the science when you last did your update in 2018 of 50 feet for non-fish bearing streams, 100 feet for fish bearing streams. I think it's 150 feet for shorelines. That's just been altered based on your shoreline master program. So that 50, 100, 150 was something that we could provide to our community members that was onerous to say, here's a stream, and in addition to the width of the stream, there's 100 feet, 50 feet on this side, 50 feet on that side, that is better off left untouched. You can encroach into that if you need to develop and provide the appropriate mitigation analysis and plans for that, but leave that untouched. Or 200 if there are fish, or larger for the main streams. Department of Fish and Wildlife analysis now, and Pat, you'll recognize this from your support the last time, or when you were running for mayor, you were saying the city should embrace the Fish and Wildlife recommendations that they came out with. Then they've changed it from that 50, 100, 150 to what is the site potential tree height for a tree after 200 years of growth?
What?
Yeah.
That has something to do with the fish?
That has something to do with the fish.
Little spotted owl.
Tree falls with the fish.
Tree falls in the
Tree
forest.
falls.
If
Would you hear?
all the
Hit a
farms
stupid-
are gonna make a
hit a
noise.
If you start asking questions, then I get to, so no questions until they're done, okay?
And so for us, it depends, well, for everyone, it depends on the soil. And based on our soils, we're part of our town, the tallest tree potential is a western hemlock. For other parts, it's a Douglas fir. And those are mapped boundaries from the soil survey that we can provide as a map. I don't have the specifics here, but generally that's between 190 to 205 or so, going from 50 or 35. I didn't explain a 35, going from 50 to 200 or 400 if you're looking at it. Wow, that's going to be big. Communities have to update their regulations for critical areas on a schedule that's determined by the state. Our community is later than others, so Puget Sound communities are the first that are going through the updates. Seeing how to incorporate Fish and Wildlife Festival listings for site potential tree height will benefit from how they wrestle with that and the solutions that they come up with. The next set is includes Clark County, and so those jurisdictions are going through that process right now. So we'll have fairly local examples. I'm proud to get to that, but it's going to be a major focus. I want to really introduce that now and have a discussion about it moving forward. I talked to Pat beforehand on this, and after the last meeting, we talked about the state funding that they're giving us to assist with this update. Pat was an advocate before of doing an analysis for property owners, not placing the burden on the property owner to determine where all those build or no build areas exist on the property. Has since pulled away from that as a suggestion for having the city contracts with habitat biologists to go forward. But we are due to give our scope of work to the state to have access to those grants. So have a discussion about that generally to understand what you all are thinking, so we can tailor that scope of work to achieve the best we can achieve with this. Related, I have reached out to City of North Bonneville and Skamania County, who are on the same update schedule as us, to see how they're planning to use those funds, what they're gonna do. North Bonneville is due to soon update their shoreline master program, and so they've been grappling with some of that site potential tree height through that effort. So it's not foreign to them. And didn't seem to be much of a concern to the planner there. And then with Skamania County, still waiting on information back about whether they want or what their approach is going to be, how they intend to use their larger population, bigger jurisdiction, bigger population. Yeah, put it out there as a discussion point. Focusing on fish and wildlife habitat areas as the main one. That's going to be something that will be discussed from here to whenever we adopt the update, which is due by June 30th of 2026.
That was gonna be my question, wasn't it? I know we're not the first round or the second round, but we're pretty early in that.
Do you just off the top of your head, you see any litigation coming down the pipe from this? From pushback from agencies, i.e. cities? About this because it's gonna dramatically affect the buildable land inventory that you have within your city limits. And I can see that economic impact. And so I just, just from your own experience, do you think there might be some litigation coming down the pipe on that?
I think it'd be new legislation would be the first act of their jurisdictions would talk to the legislature to
circumvent this.
Yeah, break something before there's
I hate
litigation.
government
It'd be hard to
overreach.
do that. The litigation that's more likely is the city being sued for taking them.
Yeah.
Critical area regulations have something called reasonable use allowance that deals specifically with that. So we don't want to be in a position where you remove all reasonable economic use from a piece of property.
Right.
And so there's a process to justify that this is a reasonable economic use and it's having the least possible
Impact.
yeah, impact on those areas.
Thank you, Ben.
Is that? Ben, on the tree heights you talked about, were those just fish bearing streams? And I know you discussed that on the phone with me a while back, but I don't quite remember the particulars on the tree heights. Without going into detail on the trees as you already did, was that just for fish bearing streams or was that for NS as well?
All streams.
Yeah, the thought, since Ben asked us for thoughts. One of the thoughts I have, and when Ben and I talked on the phone about this, I said, well, what I advocated and is that we do really good outreach with our own citizens on this, because the thing I'll eventually look at is what is minimally, based on what you said, Dave, what can we minimally, what's a minimal regulation that we can put in place and still meets the state rules?
Yes.
And for example, and then one of the things I'll look at as a council person is, well, what did Skamania County do with these regulations too? In other words, are we doing more than those other counties? And if so, I would have questions as to why. Like, well, if they can legally get by with less, then can we legally get by with less? In North Bonneville, so they may be examples, but then we know, and Ben is aware, maybe all of us are aware of pieces of property. I mean, we are stuck in this city limits here.
Yeah.
And
all around us.
And what's been frustrating to me is, and probably Ben as well, and the staff and the citizens here definitely is, we've got nothing but protected land for miles and miles all around us. And then we take the only area we can build, which is we all want infill. And then the poor citizen is going, that doesn't make sense. Anyway, those are just some of my general comments now. And one of the, for way of procedure is you do your work, Ben, does this thing go to the planning commission, or how long a process do we have in front of us before this gets to a serious discussion with the council next?
That depends on, that can depend on you all. The only critical areas ordinance, the updates there aren't required to obtain planning commission approval. Your zoning code has a process where you ask for a recommendation from them and they give you a recommendation. You can deviate from that, but you get a recommendation. We don't have that with the planning commission. However, they are adept at dealing with depth. As I described the difference between planning commission and city council is about breadth. You've got a lot of topics to cover. Tonight's agenda, as an example, this was supposed to be just on this critical areas ordinance, and we're talking about several other topics. So breadth versus depth. So planning commission generally has fewer topics to discuss, and so they go in deep on those topics.
And we appreciate that too.
And so it is one that the planning commission has led those discussions and been the primary public forum for those critical areas updates in the past two rounds of updates. And so I'd propose to keep it that way, have them.
You said that there's like the first round of these happening, of like sound or whatever. When is the deadlines for them, and then when would be the deadlines for the group that includes Clark County? What do those look like, and what kind of time turnaround would we have to look at those before we had to make?
These all operate on the state fiscal year,
Yeah.
legislative year, so June 30th. 2024, Puget Sound,
Oh,
2025, Clark County and others, 2026. Muscogee County.
So like soon, Puget Sound will have their stuff. Okay,
Yeah, Clark County has updated theirs, and has, define their riparian management zone. That's a bit of a jargon difference from buffer, which is what the jargon we've used in the past is buffer from that, stay out of there. So I don't know exactly, I haven't analyzed much of what riparian management zone means for Clark County and how much that differs from buffer.
gotcha.
This, I can only imagine as a developer, having purchased property, knowing the existing critical areas requirements, and now have this thrown into the mix as well. Could dramatically affect your ability to do the development that you want, and thus a real economic impact to that developer. Boy.
Yeah, I'd definitely be interested to see where this first round, where they land on that, what kind of steps they're gonna take, because that'll, I mean, that's
They
a,
meaning the planning.
no, Puget Sound area.
Puget,
is-
yeah,
is
okay, I
in-
get it.
'cause at the end of this month is their deadline.
Yeah, because really we could use as a template, I guess I am agreeing with Dave in terms of, I mean, we don't need to get into a debate on overreach and how much environment,
right.
I'm not, and I don't know you weren't intending that. But I am concerned about the instances I've seen in town where people can't develop and it just, and on the surface, you could get in debate whether it's logical or not, but
Yeah.
that's why the minimal impact that this can legally have on us is what I'm in favor of, and if it's just one person. And if there's what other agencies municipalities have done, if they've met those guidelines.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I
Yeah,
kinda-
that's why I'm in
At the end of
agreement.
this month, we'll know.
I'm
what
in
they-
agreement
What they
with
did,
you.
and then a year, at the end of June
Yeah.
next year, we'll know what that other group has
Yeah.
done. So I'd absolutely be interested to see it's kind of those results. But thank you for bringing this up now, so that we can be actively at least looking at it.
Do I hear strategic direction from this council, to do what Pat's suggesting, the minimal on that? Is that something?
That's what I would
We
like.
can hand that.
That's what I would like to see us do, yeah.
The part that,
Direction.
that really baffles me on this is the exact response that Dave had, what? So if someone comes up into City Hall and says, okay, let's talk about how far back from this critical area you have to build, and say, well, that's the area that has this particular type of tree, and in 200 years, it could get this tall, they're gonna go, what? So as opposed to, okay, 50, 100, 150.
Yeah.
So peer reviewed sounds a little suspect. So, or who the peers were that agreed that this was gonna be trotted out to the cities and then asked to build critical area management around, and then guidance for those that are attempting to develop their own property. So curious to see how this goes.
Nothing that a chainsaw
Yes,
couldn't fix.
The low, whatever is state guideline, we can't. We're not trying to break the law.
Our buildable land is pretty
We need
minimal
to find out
already.
what that is,
Mhm.
right?
And it just legislative,
Mhm.
when you talk about what's legal and what's not legal. You can put anything out there and it's legal until the court says it's not.
Yeah, but if we're also looking closely at what other jurisdictions have
Right,
have
yeah.
done,
Exactly.
yeah.
And I think that's something the planning commission could definitely look at as well. Do a deep, I mean, what steps did they take in the areas that have already started enforcing this? And what's that look like?
Yeah, because you could argue, well, we're also trying to implement a lot of the state's rhetoric in terms of infill and stuff like that.
Right,
So
there's
we're
a-
trying to get housing here. We're
Mhm.
trying to keep costs as low as we can.
Sure.
And I know these may end up being under the old rule, but actually, so we don't need to go into detail on the nitty gritty of maybe what we've had in the past or what we currently have. But I've had citizens, and it makes sense to me, they say, why do we have more protection like for an NS stream in Stevenson, but as soon as you get to the county, it's half the protection. So you would think that the farther away you get from your dense population, the protection would grow, because here it's the only place you can put stuff. So it just seems that that's why, I mean, you've got my thoughts already, and they seem, I think we got
Thank you, Ben.
consensus actually.
Yeah.
On some stuff.
Appreciate you,
Yeah.
appreciate your input and your insight.
Thank you.
Do you need more from us, Ben, as far as direction goes on this right now?
None on that right now.
Okay.
Understanding that it's, the door's open to discuss
Mhm.
things as they advance.
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
Make this easy as possible for you all to have your deliberations here.
Mhm.
But one thing is the planning commission, let's say they weigh in on this whenever that is. I mean, obviously they would be told what the council's thinking in terms
Right,
of.
that's what they.
Yeah,
that's what we
right,
give
right.
Ben. He
I'm just
gives Ben,
reiterating
yes.
that, yeah,
Absolutely.
okay.
Right. Thank you, Ben.
Leona?
ARPA funds. So. We have been working with the Downtown Association to figure out if there's a project that they could leverage the funds for. And ultimately, they weren't able to come to agreement on a project. And so we have about $300,000 that we have to spend by the end of the year. And there's very strict guidelines as to how we can spend it.
Commit or spend?
Obligate.
Obligate.
So it has to be under contract.
Hmm.
By the end of the year.
I would move to approve spending for the remaining $298,313 in ARPA funds on the water treatment plant.
Wastewater.
Wastewater, excuse me, the wastewater treatment plant.
I could,
Fiscal
but I mean,
responsibilities that we currently have.
I'll second that.
So the first and second, any discussion?
Yeah, I have just a few questions. So because we had a choice of either or here, right? That's the way I'm reading it. Yeah, so. And that, now, what Mr. Jessel had pointed out. So this is actually where we would be meeting, we would be approving his suggestion.
What we would be doing is allocating this amount of money to that balance
Okay,
right now.
yeah.
Which
right,
would drop that balance
Okay,
we currently owe by $298,000.
right, okay, I get it. I'm with you. Okay, no more questions.
That's my intent.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Right.
Mr. Mayor, we can't hear a lot of you here. You're speaking to each other, and those of us with gray hair here. Would it be possible to put a microphone sometime for the next meeting here so that we can
Oh,
hear? your
like a speaker back there?
Yes, it's difficult to hear someone who's speaking, someone louder than others.
We
Just
will
for
take a look at
clarity.
that.
Thank you.
Carolyn?
Next item for business is a local agency agreement supplement. So this is an agreement with, WashDOT that adjusts, the funding for the First Street project. So because we now have, before it was an estimate, so supplement one was an estimate, and now that we have numbers from our consultant, for construction management, inspection services, as well as a bid from the contractor. This needs to be updated to identify whether the funds are coming from the feds or agency. We also got more money from the feds, so it also represents that accounting.
So this is additional money that we're getting from feds and WS and
It's,
WADOT.
it's updating the agreement with Washout about like where the money is coming from for the project. And it's,
So I see another $90,000 on agency funds,
where.
Is that us?
Specifically.
right down at the bottom between 237 and 328, next to the last column on the right-hand side.
So column 4,
Column 4, right down at the bottom, estimated agency funds go from 237 to 328.
so that is actually adding the construction costs to the PE costs. So
Is
that's,
that?
that's not the
it-
change.
Pardon?
No, that wouldn't, no, that's not the change. The change would be in column 2. So column 2 is this supplement, and I do not love their form. I'm like very fuzzy on how and why they do it this way. But column 2 would be this supplement, so the column 2 would show the change between the first supplement and the second supplement.
An agency in this form just means not federal.
Not federal, so it's TIB and.
So I guess my bottom line question is, how much more is this costing the city?
Nothing,
Nothing.
This
less,
is,
Okay,
that's,
all right.
Yeah.
it's not, it's
That's
not. it's
that's
not
the
an
answer
increase
that
in-
I was looking for.
yeah,
Okay,
less, because we received more money from the feds
Okay.
and from TIB.
It's just a changing of columns.
Yeah,
And you know what I mean?
got it.
And this project, I mean, historically, as you folks know, I've been opposed to this project, but this project is already under contract, correct? I mean, so we're,
Yeah,
I mean, this
We're in.
is that
Yeah.
battle of whether you're for or against this
Right,
is over.
done. Yeah,
So this is just approving it to where we can,
use the money that's coming in.
Yeah. I would move to approve the local agency agreement supplement number 2 and revise project prospectus for the First Street project for total project cost of $1,237,000 and $21.
Second,
It's first and second, any further discussion? All fair say aye.
Aye.
I,
All right, that would conclude the business of the evening.